September 10th, 1419. Mid-afternoon. The bridge at Montereau-Falion. The wooden planks creak beneath armored boots. Two barriers stand in the middle of the bridge, built by carpenters just days before. Rough timber palisades creating an enclosed space no larger than a modest chamber. The September sun beats down on the Seine Valley. On one bank, the banners of Burgundy flutter. Red St. Andrew's crosses on white fields. On the opposite shore, the dolphins of France hang limp in the still air. Duke John the Fearless stands at the southern end of the bridge. He is 48 years old, thick-shouldered, his face weathered by campaigns from the forests of Le Mans to the disaster at Nicopolis 23 years prior. His men cluster behind him, knights in full harness, hands resting on sword pommels, eyes scanning the opposite bank where the Dauphin's forces wait. Someone has warned the Duke. Someone always warns men who are about to die. His escorts have doubled their watch. They search faces. They count armed men on the far side. John hesitates. His advisors lean close, whispering. "Turn back," they urge. "This is madness." But France is bleeding. The English advance along the Seine. 4 years after Agincourt, the kingdom fractures like old parchment. If he does not make peace with the Dauphin now, there may be no France left to fight over. John begins his walk onto the bridge. 10 men accompany him, as agreed. Each has sworn an oath. The Dauphin Charles waits in the wooden enclosure with his own escort of 10. Among them, Tanneguy du Châtel, the provost of Paris who saved the Dauphin's life barely a year ago when Burgundian forces stormed the Hotel St. Paul. Jean Louvet, the Dauphin's financial advisor, a Provençal lawyer whose fortunes rose with the Armagnac faction, and Hobert de Loire, whose master, the Duke of Orléans, died 12 years ago with his hand severed and his skull split by an axe. The Duke enters the enclosure between the barriers. To understand what happens on that bridge, we must go back 12 years. Louis, the Duke of Orléans, the younger brother of King Charles VI, leaves the Hotel Barbette. Queen Isabeau has just given birth. The streets are dark, lit only by torches carried by Louis's guards. He is 48 years old, handsome, ambitious, rumored to be the Queen's lover. Power in France flows through him while his brother the king descends ever deeper into madness. A messenger approaches. The king requests the Duke's urgent presence at the Hotel St. Paul. Louis mounts his mule, singing. His guards form around him, but not enough guards. 15 masked men emerge from a rented house. They have waited in that building since June, paid for by real estate agents who asked no questions. Their leader is Raoulé de Anqueton, a Norman knight. He serves John the Fearless. The attack is swift and brutal. An esquire named Jacob throws himself between the assassins and the Duke. He dies in seconds. Louis's hand is severed at the wrist. An axe splits his skull. His brains scatter across the cobblestones. The guards flee or fall. The masked men vanish into the darkness. By dawn, all Paris knows. Suspicion falls immediately on Duke John of Burgundy, cousin to the murdered man. 3 days later, John flees to his own territories. But he does not deny the crime. Instead, he commissions a defense. Jean Petit, a theologian at the Sorbonne, delivers a justification before the royal court. The Duke of Orléans, Petit argues, was a tyrant who threatened the king's life through black magic. His murder was not a crime, but tyrannicide, a necessary act for the general good of the realm. It is one of the most insolent pieces of political rhetoric in French history. The people of Paris, already resentful of Louis's taxes and debaucheries, accept this explanation. John the Fearless returns to the capital. King Charles VI, in one of his lucid moments, absolves him at the Treaty of Chartres in 1409. But Louis's son Charles, Duke of Orléans, does not forget. Neither do the powerful lords who gathered at his wedding to Beaune d'Armagnac in 1010. They form a coalition, the Armagnac faction. named after the bride's family. What begins as vendetta becomes civil war. The French knights charge across muddy ground toward English longbowmen. They are the flower of French chivalry, mounted on the finest destriers, armored in the latest Italian plate. They outnumber the English 3-1. They are slaughtered. Henry V of England watches the French nobility drown in mud and arrows. Charles d'Orléans, son of the murdered duke, is captured. The Duke of Brabant, the Count of Nevers, the Duke of Alençon, dead. In one afternoon, England achieves what decades of campaigning could not: the near total destruction of French military power. Duke John the Fearless is not at Agincourt. He claimed delays prevented his arrival. Many suspect he allowed the disaster to weaken his Armagnac enemies. If so, the strategy succeeds brilliantly. The Armagnac faction loses most of its military leadership. John enters Paris as savior of the city. But Agincourt changes the calculus of French politics. The English threat becomes existential. Henry V advances along the Seine, taking Normandy piece by piece. What follows is a massacre. Armagnac supporters are hunted through the streets. The Seine runs red. Count Bernard VII of Armagnac, Constable of France, is murdered in prison. The Dauphin, Charles, barely 16 years old, flees with a handful of supporters. Tanneguy du Châtel, the provost of Paris, carries him from the Hôtel Saint-Paul in his arms. They escape to Bourges to the protection of Yolande of Aragon, Charles's mother-in-law. The boy witnesses the butchery. He sees his father's capital drown in blood. He learns that his cousin John of Burgundy will stop at nothing. These memories do not fade. By the summer of 1419, even Duke John recognizes that civil war has become suicidal. Henry V takes Poissy on July 31st, barely 20 miles from Paris. The English king now speaks openly of claiming the French throne. The Burgundians control Paris, and the king, the Dauphin, holds the south. Between them, France dissolves. John and Charles meet at Puy-le-Fort. Against all expectations, they reach an agreement. The Treaty of Puy-le-Fort promises alliance against the English. On July 19th, a Te Deum celebrates their reconciliation in Paris, and France dares to hope. But the Armagnac councillors who surround the Dauphin see no hope in this treaty, only disaster. Jean Louvet, Tanneguy du Châtel, Robert de Loire, these men rose to power through civil war. Peace with Burgundy means their influence ends. Worse, they remember what John did to their predecessors: the massacre of 1418, the assassination of 1407. The Duke of Burgundy never forgets. He never forgives. If he gains control of the Dauphin, the Armagnacs are dead men. John understands this calculation. His finances are in chaos. His alliance with England has grown complicated. But if he can control both the king and the Dauphin, France is his. He proposes a second meeting to seal their alliance permanently. The location? The bridge at Montereau. The Dauphin and his forces arrive early, occupying the northern bank and the town of Montereau itself. Duke John approaches from the south with his escort. Both sides number in the hundreds, but the agreement stipulates only 20 men will enter the enclosure, 10 from each side. Carpenters have constructed the barriers with deliberate care. 2 wooden palisades create a neutral space where the rivals can meet without their armies. The symbolism is clear. This enclosed space represents trust. Within these barriers, they are equals. Within these barriers, oaths have been sworn. The Duke's advisors urge caution. His entourage doubles the watch. Scouts report the Dauphin's disposition. Burgundian knights note faces among the Armagnac escort: Tanneguy du Châtel, Jean Louvet, Robert de Loire, the Vicomte de Narbonne, former servant of the murdered Duke of Orléans. The same Robert who swore vengeance for his master.
John hesitates at the southern end of the bridge. "Turn back," his counselors whisper. But to turn back now is to admit fear, to admit weakness, to abandon the peace that might save France. The Duke has spent 15 years proving he fears nothing. He earned his surname at Nicopolis, fighting the Ottomans with reckless courage. He will not let men call him Jean the Cautious. He enters the enclosure. The door closes behind him. The Dauphin Charles stands waiting. He is 17 years old, thin, with the hollow eyes of someone who has seen too much. He fled Paris in Tanneguy's arms while Burgundian soldiers butchered his supporters. He watched his father sign away his inheritance to the English. He learned that power belongs to those willing to use violence without hesitation. Duke John kneels before him. The gesture is correct, respectful, a vassal before his prince. But there is something performative in it, something that suggests John is humoring a child. Charles stares at him with what witnesses later describe as impenetrable eyes. He does not acknowledge the Duke's bow. He does not speak. John rises. His hand moves to the hilt of his épée, perhaps for support, perhaps instinctively sensing danger. His fingers close on the pommel. Robert de Lois's voice cuts through the silence. "You put your hand on your épée in the presence of His Highness the Dauphin." The words hang in the air for a heartbeat. Then Tanneguy du Châtel moves. He does not wait for justification. He does not ask permission. He steps forward with an axe and strikes the Duke across the face, crying, "Kill! Kill!" Armed men rush into the enclosure. The Duke of Burgundy falls beneath multiple blades. His escorts try to defend him, but are overwhelmed. The Dauphin Charles stands at a distance, watching. His face shows nothing. Later, Jean Séguinat, John's secretary, will testify before a Burgundian commission of inquiry. His account describes chaos, betrayal, a premeditated trap. The Burgundians call it murder. The Armagnacs call it justice. According to some accounts, though not all sources agree, John's right hand is severed from his corpse, mirroring what his assassins did to Louis of Orleans 12 years earlier. The Dauphin's guards pursue the Burgundian escorts toward Bray. The detachment holding Montereau Castle surrenders days later, lacking provisions and artillery. The deed is done. John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy, scourge of the Armagnacs, murderer of princes, lies dead on the bridge at Montereau. His blood seeps between the wooden planks into the Yonne below.
News reaches Philip of Burgundy at dawn. His father is dead, murdered during a diplomatic meeting, struck down by the Dauphin's men under pretense of parley. Philip is 23 years old, married to Michelle of Valois, the Dauphin's sister, his brother-in-law. That kinship dies with his father. Philip calls his advisors. He demands vengeance. But vengeance requires power, and power requires allies. There is only one ally strong enough to destroy the Dauphin, Henry V of England. Within weeks, Philip opens negotiations with the English king. Henry recognizes opportunity when it presents itself. He has waited for this moment, the moment when France's internal divisions become his path to the throne. On May 21, 1420, King Charles VI, in one of his increasingly rare periods of lucidity, signs the Treaty of Troyes. The terms are catastrophic for France. Henry V becomes heir to the French throne, supplanting the Dauphin Charles. Henry marries Catherine of Valois, the Dauphin's sister, his brother-in-law. He becomes regent of France immediately. When Charles VI dies, Henry will rule both England and France in personal union. The Dauphin is declared a bastard, disinherited, and guilty of crimes. The charge? Ordering the assassination of John the Fearless, who appears as the innocent victim of an assassination plot.
Charles denies involvement. He issues proclamations of innocence, but nobody believes him. The evidence is too clear. His counselors organized the meeting. His guards committed the murder. He stood 10 feet away and watched. August 31st, 1422. Château de Vincennes. King Henry V of England dies of dysentery, aged 35. He has campaigned in France for 7 years, conquered Normandy, married the French princess, secured the succession. In 2 months, he would have been king of both realms. Instead, he leaves an infant son, Henry VI, not yet a year old. On October 21, 1422, Charles VI dies in Paris. He has reigned for 42 years, most of them in madness. His death should make Henry VI King of England and France. Instead, it creates a succession crisis. The Dauphin, Charles, now Charles VII, claims the throne. His supporters control the south and west of France. The English and Burgundians hold Paris and the north. France has 2 kings, neither strong enough to destroy the other. John the Fearless murdered Louis of Orleans in cold blood, admitted the crime, and justified it as tyrannicis. He orchestrated the Paris massacre of 1418. He exploited France's weakness for Burgundian advantage. By the medieval code of blood feud, Charles VII had every reason to kill him. Charles VII himself would spend the rest of his reign denying involvement at Montereau. He would be known as Charles the Victorious after finally expelling the English from France in 1453, but the shadow of that September afternoon followed him. Did he order his cousin's death? Did he merely allow it? Or was he, 17 years old, traumatized, manipulated by ambitious counselors, simply the weapon someone else wielded? What we know is this. On September 10, 1419, Duke John the Fearless walked onto a bridge at Montereau, believing he could make peace with the Dauphin of France. The blood that fell between those wooden planks bought England 16 more years of dominance in France. It bought Philip the Good an alliance that nearly destroyed French sovereignty. It bought Charles VII a guilt he could never quite wash away. The bridge at Montereau stands where the Yonne meets the Seine. The water flows beneath it, carrying away centuries, but some stains never wash clean. Some murders echo through time, changing the course of nations. John the Fearless thought he could master France through fear and ruthless ambition. Instead, he died on a bridge, betrayed by the same methods he had used on others. His son, Philip, built the most brilliant court in Europe, but never fully trusted any French king again. And France itself paid the price, a price measured in burned villages, wasted fields, and English occupation that lasted a generation.